I'm Jennifer Waits, and I write about radio for Radio Survivor, and I'm also a longtime college radio DJ. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit of my story in photos. That's me with my dad in front of one of our old radios. My dad's an engineer who's worked in...
You're lovely to look at, but I can't see any of the slides from here. I wonder, could you stand on the other side of the screen?
Can everyone see over here? I'm going to have to use my computer to switch, so I'm going to be walking in front of the screen a bit. So anyway, I grew up in Silicon Valley. My dad's an engineer, and he was always into electronics, and so I think he refurbished this old radio. So I remember playing on this old radio when I was a little kid, and we also were in a family that was really into antiques, so I think some of my love for radio history comes from that. And that's me as a little kid. In elementary school, I was a jukebox for Halloween, which is very telling in a way, and I had my own little red tape recorder, and I made a mixtape of 50s music, and so I would press play on the tape recorder when people put treats inside that. So who knew I would later be a college radio DJ? And then when I went to Haverford College, I don't know why it took me so long, but second semester of freshman year, I found the radio station and got involved and ended up becoming music director. So here's just a glimpse of me in the my early days. Thank you, Kenya. My early days of college radio.
So cute.
And then I went to grad school, after a number of years just living in San Francisco and learning about music by going out to shows. I went to grad school in the Midwest, and I was really worried that moving from San Francisco to a small town in Ohio, nobody's going to know anything about music, so I have to get involved with the radio station again. So I got involved with WBGU at Bowling Green State University, and that was really kind of a life-changing experience in a way, because I realized how vital a radio station was sort of an alternative perspective, how important it is in a small conservative town like that. And coming from San Francisco, I didn't realize how much you really needed to cultivate these alternative cultures in a small place. And so everybody with sort of alternative ideas seemed to gravitate to the radio station in Bowling Green. So that was really important. And then I went to another grad school in California and DJ'd at KSPC at Pomona College. And go to the next one. And then I moved back to the Bay Area and got involved with KFJC. So after I got back involved in grad school, I kind of couldn't stop doing radio again. And KFJC is at Foothill College, which is a community college 40 minutes south of San Francisco. And I've been a volunteer there. Well, I've had my show since 1999. I do a music show. You can go to the next one. So through all of my personal experiences, it was clear to me how diverse college radio was, and it was also clear to me how insular most college stations were. So I started writing about college radio largely because I wanted other stations to know more about the broader community of radio, that it's more than just what you see at your own station. And so I started blogging on Spinning Indie, and actually really hardly anybody was actually writing about college radio anywhere. Nobody was blogging about the culture of college radio. In academia, there weren't that many people writing about college radio, and then let alone mainstream press writing about college radio. So I started this blog, and the same year I started the blog, I started visiting stations. And I think it was actually largely inspired by a student at another station. I'd read about him taking a little road trip to, I forget where he took the road trip to, but he was in Louisiana. He took a little road trip to see another station, and he wrote about it. So I started doing that. The first station I visited was at Emerson College, WECB, which Emerson College, probably a lot of people have heard of WERS, because that's kind of a big station there that has a big audience. People have heard of it. And they have two stations. So I wanted to go to the small, under-the-radar station, WECB, that was in a tiny little dark room. They have, you can't really see it on there, but like their metal library is one of these little boxes of CDs, which I thought was funny. And so kind of from the beginning, I really wanted to focus on under the radar, because if there ever was press about college radio in particular, it was often about bigger stations in urban areas. And I only took 14 photos on that first visit, and anybody who's had me come to your station knows that I take a lot more now. So by 2016, I've written about more than 114 station visits. And even though I started out doing college radio, I've branched out. So I've been to a Christian radio station, and that's a photo right there at Family Radio. I don't know if you remember Harold Camping, who had billboards all over the world announcing the end of the world. And so I was there close to the end of the world, and that was their IT guy, their webmaster guy, and he's got a trucker hat and a shirt talking about the end of the world. It was like 10 days before the end of the world. So I've been to community radio stations, commercial radio stations, high school radio stations, internet radio stations, pirate radio stations, public radio stations, and even some radio stations that aren't really radio stations, like pop-up radio stations. Red Bull Music Academy did a pop-up station that I visited. And so within the 114 tours I've written up 79 college stations, more than 23 community radio stations, and more than 11 low-power FM, or soon-to-be low-power FM stations, which has been kind of an exciting thing to see. So I started to realize things I'd already been realizing, right? Like radio in general is diverse, and also that I love the culture of college radio, so not just spreading the word, but also I enjoy seeing what stations look like and looking at all the artifacts. So that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about. And then the importance of radio history. So in my travels, I've seen really cool things from the past, and so I've gotten involved with the Library of Congress's Radio Preservation Task Force and helping to spread the word about the importance of saving radio history, especially in college and community radio, where we might not have as much infrastructure to do that. So even at news stations, I'm noticing, making note of, and encouraging people to start thinking about how you save your history and your stories. So here's a glimpse of some of my stops. Some places might look familiar. Here's KHDX, which I just visited a few days ago. It's a college radio station at Hendrix in Conway. And they're a Class D FM station, which is a really small percentage of the FM dial. So it's cool to see that. It's student-run, and they've been around since 1973. And I was really excited when I was arranging my tour. They hadn't heard about GRC, and they're here. So, like, even arranging the tour led to them coming to the conference, which is so awesome. And I love that. Like, part of what I like to do is connect people and build this bigger community. So here's a glimpse at their studio. And that box, you have, like, sort of a mixtape-like project.
Yeah, it's like a exchange project where people can just, like, leave things or, like, take things and put them back. So, like, make CDs or something like that.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. I'll do the next one. And then I also went to KPSQ, and I wrote the call letters wrong right there, I just noticed, in my sleep-deprived state, and seeing, like, how many stations I've seen in the past couple days. So KPSQ in Fayetteville, and I saw that the night that I came in, and luckily they stayed late to see me. And so they launched on May 11th. Low Power FM community radio station in the Chancellor Hotel. And this is in their production studio, which is serving as their on-air studio at the moment while they're building out and raising funds to build their studio, which that's a picture of some of the folks looking out the window of the soon-to-be studio. And then I also went to KABF, which is in Little Rock, and became there right before coming to GRC. And I don't think anyone's here today from KABF, but they came to the conference on the first day, and they are a full-powered FM station, 100,000 watts is what I was told. That's crazy. community radio since 1984, and they're in this great house-like building. And there's John Kane, and he's been there since the beginning. He's in the studio. And then, she's not in the room, but Sharon and Sean from Art FM also came to GRC, and this is their station, WXOX Art FM in Louisville. And they launched on Valentine's Day on FM, but they launched online only prior to that, a few years prior. And these are actually pictures from 2015. So I visited when they were in their first studio. So it looks different now, but it looked pretty cool at the time. And it was right around Valentine's Day, the year before they launched. And so they had a bunch of Valentine's Day themed promotional items around the station. And then U-Wave. We've got U-Wave in the room. U-Wave at University of Washington, Bothell. And so you call yourselves a campus-based community station, and they've been online since 2013. You have a construction permit, right, for your low power FM. And these are pictures from a 2014 visit to the station, and they've got the nice map from when Brown Paper Tickets was helping kind of organize a bunch of the Seattle area stations to apply for low power FM. There's the studio with the swear jar, which I was excited. Hadn't seen a swear jar at a radio station before. So there's the swear jar. And then Tacoma Radio, they're not here, but I also visited them before their studio was completely done and before they launched. They are in Tacoma Park, Maryland, WOWD.LP. And they launched on July 16th of this year, and these are photos from February. And so it was cool in the place where the studio was going to be built. They actually had sort of artist interpretations of what a radio studio would look like. So this is, made with paper, they had like a paper board and various pieces of radio equipment crafted out of paper. And then at the time, the founder, and this is in her living room, she had sort of the studio set up and training set up in her living room before that studio was built. And we were talking about programming and what it was going to be like. Okay, so these are things I've seen at radio stations. This is like the goofy fun part. Purloined U.S. mail tubs. Maybe this looks familiar. Maybe you've seen something like this at your station. You can just flip through. Sometimes I see CDs in them, sometimes records. Ron Burgundy, I've seen at multiple radio stations too for some reason. Graffiti. This is at the San Francisco State Station, which is totally covered in graffiti. Lewis and Clark College, they have like a couple walls of graffiti, but then other walls they've painted with nice fresh paint. This is at WRFL in Kentucky, and they were actually getting ready to move, so they had a bunch of stuff on the wall that they kind of wanted to take pictures of before they had to move to their new building. Sticker plastered cabinets and walls is a staple of college radio. This is at the MIT station, WMBR. And this is at KUSF before they lost their FM frequency. And actually some of their sticker cover cabinets are with San Francisco Community Radio, which is some alums of the station. This is at the McAllister College radio station. I also bring KFJC stickers wherever I go and stick them on cabinets. So skulls. For some reason, it's a trend, and I've seen skulls at very many stations, like WMFO at Tufts. That was a drawing. That's a skull at the Harvard station. And that's at CalX at UC Berkeley. And I was going to say something about a skull. Maybe go back to the Harvard one if you can. The Harvard station is interesting. They have all these different departments based on music genre at the station. So this was in what they call the Record Hospital Lounge. So they have a record library and a lounge area for sort of the rock music department, one for the classical department, one for the jazz department, and they all have their own unique identity. So like the classical department, stereotypically like the stereotype played out, and it's very pristine and organized and very nicely appointed, and the Rock Hospital looks like kind of a classic college radio station with stickers and posters all over the walls and skulls and penis drawings. I love handmade signs, you know, just showing the personality of the station. And I remember when I was music director at my college station, leaving handmade signs like, please play the music, you know. This is for the music director inbox at the UC Santa Barbara station. And I know some people from UC Santa Barbara station have participated in GRC. This is at WONC at North Central College. And I think this is actually a really clever idea. They have a little shelf right outside the studio where you put your drinks as a reminder to not bring your drink into the studio. Like, I think that's the only place I've seen that, where it makes it so incredibly easy. So like that. And then KPOO in San Francisco. Don't smoke anything inside KPOO. They also had signs saying, never say K-poo, say KPOO. Because I've always said K-poo. I didn't realize you weren't supposed to say K-poo. Pop culture artifacts. The advisor's office at the UC Irvine College radio station is jam-packed with Simpsons paraphernalia. He used to have tarantulas and turtles. And last time I visited, he showed us a big jar of tarantula sheds, like the skins they'd shed off. Here's an arcade game at Denver Hackerspace. They are they're an organization that they were in competition for a low power FM with Denver Open Media, and they ended up joining forces. And now Denver Hackerspace is actually in the same building as Denver Open Media. So this is kind of in the Denver Hackerspace portion of the space. But the radio station is just down the hall, and at this point it's sort of a radio station on a shelf, they've described it as, because they don't really have a full studio yet. Dolls, Creepy Dolls at BFF.FM, which is a streaming only community radio station, which is interesting. Like, I don't know, does GRC include streaming only stations in their definition of community? And then I've seen wall art, records and CDs. That's at WVFI at Notre Dame. Always makes me kind of sad to see records on the wall. CDs on the wall at WONC in Naperville. Disco balls. This was at Art FM. There's a little tiny disco ball. And this is at Radio 1190 in Boulder. And actually, if anyone was here this morning when Michi was talking about AM stations that have gotten FM translators, Radio 1190 is an AM college radio station that recently got an FM translator. And they have disco ball. And then there's one in Hollow Earth Radio. So they're soon to be LPFM, right?
Yeah. Yeah, on the verge.
On the verge. There was one day when I went to 2 stations and I saw 2 disco balls in one day. I was like, whoa, a lot of disco balls. Funky couches. This is when some of my content was stolen for BuzzFeed. I think it was largely because of my pictures of stinky couches. There's a funky couch at WMFO. Bellarmine, actually quite a nice couch at Bellarmine College in Louisville, and my friend's daughter. And this is, so WVFI was my husband's college radio station at Notre Dame, and we were on campus with our 2-year-old at the time, and we're like, how are we going to do this tour and pay attention with her pestering us? And then she ended up passing out on the radio station couch, which is like hilarious and disgusting at the same time. And now she's 10, and I'm showing her that, she's laughing. And this is remember at Harvard I said there's the Record Hospital Lounge, which is sort of the rock department at the station. This is I think that's in the rock department. Well, it's somewhere at the Harvard station. It looks really kind of frightening, that couch back there. I've been to stations before where people have said, oh, you don't want to sit on that couch. So, do you guys have color code guides? I've seen these at a lot of stations where people put stickers on physical music to identify what record library it's in. So here's one version at Tufts. So it's, color coded by genre. And then there's another dot system at the MIT station. And there's one at the McAllister station that looks very confusing to me. Some stations are lucky enough to have bathrooms. That's at WRFL in Kentucky. That's at Tufts. A lot of graffiti. I think this is at RAS at Georgia State. They actually put a lot of their promo, the band promo flyers up in the, or like the glossy photos are up in the bathroom. So it has kind of an 80s look to it. I've seen some amazing murals at radio stations throughout the country. And that's at KLC in Portland at Lewis and Clark College. Some record faces. And WMUC at University of Maryland. Some other like really amazing art. That station is huge. They have a 2-story record library with a catwalk. It's crazy. WMFO at Tufts. And then music libraries. This is at BFF.FM. That's the station manager and founder there, peeking in. They're in this really cool space called the Secret Alley in San Francisco that's sort of an artist space. And it was envisioned to be sort of this Jules Verne type environment. So it's really magical feeling. And so she's sort of peeking in, and it's almost like you're in the inside of a pirate ship or something. This is very recently at K-Chung in Los Angeles, which is a community radio station. They have a bunch of cassette tapes there. And they're, I think, an unlicensed micropower station. There's some vinyl at Chaos at Evergreen College in Olympia, Washington. And then at KPOO, they actually had a labeled music on the wall, I guess in case you don't really know what an 8-track is, or a card is, or a cassette, or a reel-to-reel. And they had a 10-inch labeled. It's kind of interesting. And then some stations use album cover art as decor. At SCAD Atlanta, which is a streaming station at the Savannah College of Art and Design, apparently the music directors were really obsessed with yacht rocks. They had a lot of easy listening type album covers on the ceiling. And then this is at Harvard in one of their music libraries. And actually, like, one of these album covers sort of haunts me. It's just the craziest album cover I've ever seen. The Oil and Vinegar, kind of sexually explicit vegetables. And then WLOY at Loyola in Baltimore. They have a bunch of album covers just at the entrance to the station. And I've seen random bobbleheads. Benjamin Franklin. I think that's in sync. And then Leo Blaze. So you can go to the next one. I started noticing that I was seeing signs like this in a lot of places, including the station where I DJ. And you can go to the next one. There's the back of it. So it's sort of this 3-dimensional handcrafted sign with your call letters on it. And I would ask people where it came from, and people would say, I don't know, I think a fan sent that to us, or a DJ. There's KBOO, WPGU. And then I was on one tour, my husband actually spotted a Leo Blaze CD on the wall. I was like, oh, good eye. So it turns out it's this guy, Leo Blaze, who makes these signs, and he sent them out with his record to stations. And he sent out a lot. I've seen them all over the country at sort of random stations. And he even made some for some of the people at NPR. Bob Boylan has a bunch at his desk, and I even talked my way up to his desk because I wanted to take a picture of the Leo Blaze signs. And they let me. He was very nice. Some stations have a tradition of taking Polaroids of their staff or of people who come through the station, and they post them on the wall, like WMFO does. And then I've seen some ways of kind of showing your station history. So a few stations have actually put old boards on the wall. And that's at WVAU, an American University in DC, when they're old. And there was a skull there, too, a bonus skull. And then this is at WRFL, right over their door. They had one of their boards. And then historical artifacts. So I've seen carts. That's at Swarthmore College's station, a bunch of old carts, Jedi Mind Tricks promo, Bob Mould station ID. Like, this is stuff that would be so great to get digitized. And a lot of places don't even have a way of playing that anymore. So Also at Swarthmore, some old equipment. They had a gold mine of things. At WMUC, they had a humongous room full of old equipment, which, is great for the engineering team because then they can go and grab stuff off old pieces of equipment. I think these are cassette decks, and they had VCRs and turntables just stacked floor to ceiling. They had a lot of real estate there. It was kind of amazing. Also, station history, old awards often are posted on the wall. This is from KPOO from 1977, a letter of recognition from a local association in San Francisco. So, yeah, that's fun and all to see all this cool stuff, but, what have I learned from this? Again, it's reiterating the diversity of stations. No two stations are alike. And community radio, we have online only, we have low power FM stations, we have full power FM and AM. Ownership is different across stations. Programming can vary widely, like completely local content, completely syndicated, a mixture. And there's stations that focus on music, stations that focus on talk, stations that are somewhere in the middle. And I always learn something new every time I go to a station. So I went to the Swarthmore station and I saw this on the wall. I was like, what is that? And it's a radio transcription disc. And they had a whole stack of them. And they were these 16-inch discs that stations would record their programming onto them, or you would get syndicated programming on this large disc that you would play on a special turntable.
By transcription.
Yeah. What?
I remember my dad was a radio engineer when I was a little girl. I would go with him because he was doing it overnight. And those discs were playing on these huge machines.
Yeah.
And you could hear the guy would say, by transcription, such and such and such, by
by
transcription.
Yeah, I visited a high school station that actually had transcription discs of their programming from the 40s. So it was like their recording of their material from the 40s, which, was incredible. Also through all these visits, I feel like it's helping to build a community. So this was at a University of California Radio Network conference, which is a very low-key conference that happens twice a year at a different University of California radio station. And they've opened it up a bit so college radio stations from all over California can go, and there's no cost. A different radio station hosts each time. And this was members of Common Frequency were there talking about the low power FM opportunity. So there's Todd Urich, amazing engineer and Common Frequency genius, and Gavin Dahl is over there. And then some folks from the UC Santa Barbara radio station. So for me, visiting stations is helping to build that community. So some suggestions for all of you. I really try to encourage other people. It's cool to go to a conference, but not everybody can go to a conference. So I encourage people to go visit stations in their area and meet up and get to know other people, bring other DJs. This is a crew of us from KFJC visiting KUSF, and we ostensibly went there because they had these rolling shelves, kind of like library shelves to house their CDs, and we were trying to figure out how to store our growing collection of music without having to get rid of things. And we heard they had these rolling shelves, and so we went to look at the shelves, but, we had our production director, our promotions director, and our general manager, and of course, people were seeing other things, oh, can I see your ticket giveaway book? That looks interesting. How do you do ticket giveaways here? And so we all got a ton out of that visit. It was way more than just checking out the shelves. And then, you could potentially collaborate with other stations on projects. So I've talked to college radio stations that have worked together with another nearby college station to present a show. So maybe they have a pretty small budget, but when they combine their budget with another college, they're able to bring a bigger band to the community, to a local club. A couple stations collaborated on a mixtape project where they both had local bands from their area contribute tracks, and they released a CD. And they were from different geographical areas. So one was from Minneapolis, and one was from North Carolina. So it was this cool, and I think they'd met at a college radio conference and decided, hey, why don't we do something that's connecting us, across all of these different states. And you can do things like try to do something, challenge stations to a bowling tournament or something fun, a volleyball game, have a picnic, have a mini conference. This is when I'm really trying to plant that seed. I was talking to the Arkansas people from Hendrix about, why don't you guys plan just an Arkansas community radio or college radio conference, like even just an open house at your station, and get to know people. So you can also just work to sharing your station by taking videos, posting photos on your website, so that not only other stations, but your listeners are getting a glimpse at what your world is like. And you can share that on social media. You can have an open house and host tours. So my daughter did this little drawing. We have open houses at KFJC every year around our anniversary time, and we take listeners through the station. And it's great for them because they're like, they're seeing DJs that they're getting to meet DJs who they hear on the air, and it's nice for them. And it's during our fundraising time too, so it's another opportunity for them to drop off a check. And I really want to encourage everybody to document your history. So even if you're a brand new station, just even write down your origin story. Because it's amazing how quickly we start to forget those little details. Like, oh, what day did we go on the air? What time did we go on the air? Write it down from the beginning, take pictures, keep a recording of maybe your first broadcast, keep ephemera. This is an X-Ray FM in Portland, and they're pretty new, but that's a collection of stickers on somebody's laptop. So it's a collection of some of their early stickers. So even, stuff like that, save ephemera, flyers, stickers, program guides, and collect stories from the founders at the beginning. So I was going to give you some ideas for getting started that involve outreach, research, preservation, and promotion. So as far as learning more about your station at whatever stage you're at, whether you're a 50-year-old station or a one-day-old station, talk to people who were involved with your station and have left, get their stories. So your alumni. Engage your listeners. Often listeners have stories and cassettes. The collector community frequently has station materials. So it's not, these sorts of historical objects are not always at stations. As far as researching college radio history, libraries, student publications have been invaluable for me. So looking at yearbooks and student newspapers to find out what was written about the station in the past. And local historical societies. This is the California Historical Radio Society, which is in Alameda, California, and they're not really open to the public yet, but they're also the umbrella organization for the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. They have a big open house and auction every year, and a setup where they have a vintage studio set up. It's really cool. So there are a lot of communities like that have historical societies that are devoted to radio history, so they can be great partners as well. Local broadcast organizations and museums. And then preserve your artifacts. So if you have the ability to do so, get things to climate-controlled spaces. So if you're on a college campus, you might be able to work with an archivist, and they may put things away. At WMUC at University of Maryland, they were really lucky that one of their DJs actually is an archivist who works at University of Maryland. And so she started noticing all this cool stuff at the station, and she's like, we got to get this stuff over somewhere safe. So she started collecting old reel-to-reels and flyers, and then she ultimately started a collection in the archives, and then she put together this history exhibit. So this is part of her history exhibit, and she even had part of it set up to look like an old studio kind of from the 80s with flyers and boards, and did a whole bunch of things. She did an accompanying audio piece of it. So when you went through the exhibit, you could listen to old audio from the station. It was pretty amazing. And she did a conference associated with it. You can also just appoint somebody on your staff as a volunteer historian, just so somebody is in charge of even just sticking every new program guide, every new flyer into a folder, or every newspaper or magazine article into a folder, or printing out every online story, because even online stories sort of disappear. So just have somebody responsible for that so that you don't lose it, so it doesn't disappear. And start digitizing things if you have older materials. And scan photos and ephemera. And talk to, if you're at the point, if you're an older station and you have a collection of things, talk to me about joining the Radio Preservation Task Force as an affiliate collection. Because we're just trying to find out where are there community and college radio collections out there so that we can possibly work together to get grants and so that scholars know where to find archives. And promote your station history, like from the very beginning. So at WPRBE at Princeton, they created a station history website, like a very simple idea, and it's just like a blog basically. So they didn't have to have a fully documented history. They were able to just do it like a blog. Like, oh, we've got this great story from an alum, so we're going to do a blog post about it. Like, oh, we found this really cool photo. We'll just post it into a quick blog post about it. So I like that model because it just gets you started. Because I think for me too, it's a bit overwhelming to think about writing up the entire history of KFJC. And if we had a blog to do that, I think it would make it so much easier. You can also talk to local press about your station. You can create an exhibit. So at WPRB, it was their 75th anniversary, so they went all out and did a big exhibit in the library, working with their archivist. And hold events for your anniversary. So, like I said, even at KFJC, we just hold like a simple open house every year for anniversary, and then maybe for a big anniversary, do a party, something more extensive. And join the Radio Preservation Task Force if you're an older station. And thank you. So I wanted to leave a lot of time just for questions. This is meant to be sort of just a glimpse at some of what I've seen around the country.
That looks like a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
It is fun.
Yeah, I was just thinking you could compile it, make it a book, and really all that great research. Probably an unfair question, but just off the top of your head, was there all the radio stations you've seen? Has there been one that kind of spoke to you that you say, "Well, I'd work here"? I mean, just something that was just so cool that just wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because some people are like, "Oh, our station's really small. It's not going to be interesting," and I'm honestly interested by every single station, like I'm never disappointed, but there are some stations where it feels like home to me, and it just has to do with my own experience. So like stations that feel like KFJC are the ones where it's hard to get me out of there. WZBC in Boston is like that, has a very similar mission. They have their record library, they say that their goal is to play music that has no commercial potential. And KFJC is an underground music station, so I just feel like those are my people. At Radio K, it's a different station, slightly different station format-wise. It's at University of Minnesota. But the person who toured me around was so enthusiastic and had all the time in the world, and we spent a lot of time looking through weird records in the library. So that was pretty magical. And even being at Family Radio was like pretty trippy because it was part of this big international media story, about the supposed Judgment Day. And to be there was like a bit scary and weird, but also kind of exciting, because it was putting me outside of my comfort zone. I was actually kind of frightened to be going there and worried that people were going to, find me out or something. But I was interested in it as a radio station, and most of the other reporters, there were other journalists there the same day I was there, and they were more interested in sort of making fun of Harold Camping and mocking all of it. And, you know, I got to talk to the program director and see their record library, so I saw a totally different side of it, and there's plenty to criticize about what they were doing, but it was just interesting to see, you know, it's a very old Christian radio organization, and they had a bunch of old records there, and even like their record library is organized similar to a lot of our record libraries, so that was kind of weird and interesting. Like, oh wow, like they also have you know, similar way, and they had signs about not wearing perfume in the studio, and it's kind of fascinating. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting what you're doing, collecting artifacts from college radio history, because, you know, the college radio careers of most people are just at most 4 years, and so there's this lack of continuity. I just wonder how you feel when you come into an environment like this, where there's people with this, you know, enormous history, 20, 30, 40 years of working in community radio, and where it's not the artifacts that are, although some of them may consider themselves artifacts, it seems like it's more like the living legacy of these people who are continuing to work through the struggles of creating radio, getting funding for radio, and how does that feel to, you know, encounter different worlds?
That's part of my situation too. So at KFJC, it's a college station, but we've had DJs who've been there since the early 80s.
Yeah, and I visited Goddard College. They have a similar situation where the people there have a real history.
Yeah, so it's all of that. I mean, the more transient student-only stations, that's what I worry about more, I guess, because a lot of stuff is, you might have an enthusiastic staff and then it turns over and then you don't really know what's going to happen. So I care about all of it, and the personal stories are really interesting too. I think, you know, when I'm doing a quick visit, it's easier to get a handle on the artifacts rather than the people. But the people that I meet with always make an impression.
Is there a pioneer of, you know, who should I know in the history of college radio? What's, you know,
they're all so hidden.
Did all the work.
Yeah, they're all so hidden. I mean, at my undergraduate institution, there were students who built a radio station in 1923, and, you know, one of them was a freshman, so he was a technical genius, kind of lost to history in a way. So that's a lot of what I like to, what I'm trying to bring more attention to is the contributions of college radio. College radio stations were the first to stream online of any radio station, of any kind of radio station. College radio stations have been ahead of a lot of stations as far as building websites. And
they have the funding.
Well, not necessarily.
Free labor.
Yeah, I mean, college radio stations vary tremendously as far as funding. We don't, like at KFJC, we don't get any money from the college. Some stations are funded by student fees. A lot of college stations don't have money to even come to GRC. So it's all over the map. And speaking of college, I know that I saw hands over from the Hendricks. Yeah.
So my question is kind of extending on what you were talking about, because we are very, like, our leadership and the perpetuation of our station is very student-driven. And so something that has been at the back of my mind is I'm, like, getting inspired by all these talks and discussions and everything, but Anna and I are, like, fairly high up in the administration of our station, and both of us are graduating this year. So that's an issue that I think about, because I get excited for especially, like, preserving our history, and we did a lot of new stuff this summer as far as revamping our website and, like, streamlining and making the station more accessible, especially since a lot of our DJs may not even make it through a semester. So there's a lot of turnover just within, like, the shows, because it's all students, maybe faculty have a show, but that even that drops off because we have a faculty advisor, but that is a professor that's doing all kinds of things all the time. And, like, besides just teaching, that person also has, like, independent research or labs that they manage and stuff like that. And so I'm wondering what advice you have or what you've seen that maybe worked in other places as far as like keeping enthusiasm alive, because I feel like the issue that has come that has happened a lot with our station is that we're a really small college, and it kind of, the interest for KGX is kind of a niche interest already.
Yeah.
So like, how do we keep it, like how do we help our station reach its fullest potential despite all this like turnover?
It's hard, and so many stations have like these cycles where they go into decline after the enthusiastic students leave. So, I mean, I've talked to a lot of stations where they're really excited when they get freshmen, super active freshmen and sophomores, and if you can start training your replacements and have assistants so that there's this common thread moving through, and also document what you're doing. Because there have been a lot of instances of people building things for a station and then there aren't any manuals after they leave, and then the website gets hacked and then you've lost everything. So that, I mean, that's definitely something about college radio where there's so much turnover, so you have to work extra hard. And I think having a strong advisor is good because she can be the continuity. Those are just like quick, yeah.
I was just leading a session on governance before this one, and one of the persons was a faculty advisor at this community college in Norwalk. And he said, he was talking about the same thing, that hopefully your students will graduate and go on in their lives. And he wants to get together an advisory board from the public as well as other faculty members to have some continuity over time. I mean, that doesn't give the enthusiasm to new students, but at least it can give the station its continuity.
And also stay in touch with your alums. Alums can be really great allies, you know, especially old station managers and people who are in leadership. Yeah.
The station that has kind of mastered that problem is KDBS in Davis, California. And they're completely student run, and they've been around forever. But they've worked out a leadership system based on alumni of the station. They don't have a student advisor. They don't have any.
Yeah, they have no faculty
They
involvement
have
at
no
all.
management from the university. They do it themselves, but they do it because they've worked out an elder system, which is very unique to KDVS. I've never seen anywhere else, but it works. So if you can get them on the phone, which is challenging because they are students, but if you can get them on the phone, it would be an interesting conversation for you to have, because they're the people that kind of took that by the horn and said, we're going to actually make a strength out of it. And it would be, I've never actually had a long conversation with them about it, but it would be an interesting one to have, like what they've learned. Because they're the people that did it, you know.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good.
Another similar example, when we were at CBI, right, we met Stig or Joey. Stig was at Emory, I think, and Joey from K-True, and they did a couple things like trained replacements before they left to make sure that there was a smooth transition. Created a strategic plan for the station so that there was a transition plan in place, and it sounds kind of businessy and un-radio-y, but it doesn't have to be complicated, but you want to give the next person tools. There's a guy that organizes College Radio Day every year. His name's Ron Quick. He's the faculty advisor at his station, I think in Paterson, New Jersey. And you can reach out to him. There's a Facebook page called College Radio United. And they have resources, and also I think this is the first year that they have grants for college radio stations, so they might be able to give you, sort of a small grant to give, to help you create a transition plan for your station. That would be a model, but it's an important thing to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah, College Radio United is it's like a little grassroots Facebook group for people in college radio. So I'd recommend it. And yeah, you can just toss questions out there.
The main way that college stations generally develop that kind of continuity is they have a certain percentage of their people, they become a community college station, and the community members maintain the continuity. but some college stations don't want to do that, and it's very often an uneasy relationship.
Yeah, I kind of wonder about that as far as like community involvement, because we do have a lot of alums all over the country that are very like active or excited about being involved with the school even after graduation, but we are like a really small private college in our area, and we kind of live in the shadow of a much larger public university that's nearby, so that's kind of been a challenge, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, another thing you can do is you could create an alumni, an official way to stay in touch with your alumni. Some stations have created separate kind of alumni groups of the station, and then they can help you with a variety of things, with advice, with fundraising. Because often the college radio experience is one of the most important experiences for some people of their college career. And at my college, I organized a reunion just for the radio station during alumni weekend, and there were people who said they wouldn't have come to the reunion if it wasn't for the specific college radio event. So that's something that even your alumni association might really like, because you might be engaging with some alums who are future donors who might not normally be inclined to get engaged with alumni activities. So yeah, I think minding the alums is a really good idea. How are we doing? I have like an hour and a half. It's crazy.
35 more minutes?
35 more minutes. Any other questions, or do you want to just take a break and go outside and enjoy Arkansas? Yes.
What's next for you in this project of visiting radio stations and thinking about the, artifacts and history? I know you're part of this radio preservation community, but where are you going with this next, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I have a couple book ideas that I would love to do. The Radio Preservation Task Force, we're going to be presenting at a college radio conference. So again, we're trying to evangelize and spread the word about saving things and connecting stations. And the next phase of that whole project, I think, is really bringing groups together to try to get funding for preservation. I'm probably just going to continue to obsessively visit stations. I'd like to do some stuff, it's kind of, sometimes it's easier to write about other stations, but there's also stuff at KFJC. We're approaching our 60th anniversary, so I feel like I should be spearheading something there, which seems daunting, but it's in a couple years, and I think it'd be cool to put together a book. There's a station in Canada at Calgary, at a university in Calgary, and they just put together a book for their 30th anniversary, I think. So trying to get inspiration from other people's projects and kind of encourage stations to take on things like that. So I'm going to try to get that going at KFJC, do something for the 60th maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Get funding to do things. Because it's sort of like, most of this is a labor of love, so I visit stations when I'm out of town already.
In terms of the people that you encounter at these stations, what do you see that they have in common? I mean, I see the objects that you kind of see over and over again. What kind of people do you find are shared by community radio stations?
I mean, just incredible passion. Like I was mentioning when I was at Radio K, there was a student who toured me around the station, and it was like a Friday night or something, and he had all the time in the world. And so even though I'm visiting a bunch of different stations, there's just incredible passion for radio, which is really inspiring and infectious. And it's been really fun with the Low Power FM to see people who have had this dream of having a station and how hard they've been working through the licensing application window, and then to see these stations getting on the air is really gratifying. A real devotion to community and to music. So it's like finding my people. And it's funny because often when strangers will ask, say I'm a writer, what do you write about? Radio. And for a lot of people it's like, what is there to write about radio? It seems so foreign. But I look at the world through the lens of radio, and there's so many things that radio touches, and there's so many stories that involve radio and across different categories like art and activism and natural disasters, and student life and culture. If you look at the history of a college radio station, you can see all these fascinating things happening on campus. In the 60s and 70s, they were often kind of a hotbed for talking about student protest movement. And college radio DJs were arrested on some campuses for covering events. So, meeting people who are currently doing radio is inspiring. Meeting people who did radio years ago, that's inspiring to hear their stories. In a really weird coincidence, Lorenzo Milam actually did college radio at my undergraduate college at Haverford. And so I interviewed him about his experiences at the Haverford College. At the time, it was just campus-only AM carrier current radio. So I asked him about that experience, and he was like, it was the most godforsaken station I've ever been at. It was up in the attic. The turntables always spun at the wrong speed, ruining my concerts. So it's kind of, and that was kind of cool. Like, wow, we both were sort of involved in the same station. It's pretty random. And for me, what got me into radio and why I continue to do a show is my passion for music. So I like being around people who are interested in music, but it's gotten so much bigger than that as I've started writing about radio and seeing all the different purposes that a station can have. So while I might feel maybe most at home at a station more like KFJC, I have so much respect for all kinds of stations. I don't know if that answered that, but Sabrina?
You might have mentioned this earlier and I missed it, but can you talk about what I think is the Library of Congress's project to...
Yeah, the Radio Preservation Task Force.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's it's a big project, and it's mostly academics that are involved, but also some archivists. And we had a big conference in DC in February where a lot of scholars talked about work that they're doing with radio history and radio archives. So the first phase has really been to find out what sorts of radio archives are out there and which are in most danger. So like reel-to-reels that might be off in some shack somewhere that's about to be torn down. And some of the goals relate to, connecting these materials with scholars who might find it interesting and worth writing about, and then also attaching all of it to an educational purpose. So can we use some of these archives out there as part of lesson plans in high school and higher education too? So there's a gold mine of stuff. And we've seen some things in Canada. There's a college radio station that digitized a bunch of their historic recordings and then posted it online. And they also started doing documentaries utilizing those materials. So it's kind of amazing when you start to think about all the ways that you can use these archival materials. I know the Pacifica archives have been mined for some interesting projects, because oftentimes radio stations have some of the only records of, like early gay and lesbian activist movement. There were college radio stations that had some of the first gay talk shows. So at that conference, there were presentations about all sorts of things, the history of a radio preacher who is so obscure today, but, his broadcasts were heard all over the world at one point in time. So, bringing these stories to life and, that's some of it. So I'm trying to evangelize, especially with college and community radio stations, if you've been around a long time, I want people to start looking at what they have and making sure that their materials are safe and maybe somewhere climate controlled. Make a list, let me know you have it, and I'll add you to the list of the archives that we're collecting.
So the Library of Congress, is it will it digitize the station's archive?
No, we're just sort of finding out what's out there, and then we'll create a database, and then the people on the task force are eventually going to work on projects like finding grants, maybe. So maybe we'll see what sorts of collections are there, and then figure out if maybe there's a way that some of us can work together to find grants.
So what's it called again? It's the Library of Congress.
Radio Preservation Task Force. And I can probably, can I upload a URL to maybe to the conference site or something? Yeah, and you can always just email me, Jennifer@radiosurvivor.com, and I can.
So would
Thank
you
you.
partner with a station to help them figure out how to digitize something?
I'm not an expert about it, but I can.
I mean, the project?
Yeah.
And you know what else is Rick Prellinger from the Prellinger Archives
Mhm.
when KUSF's library was at risk?
Say that again. I didn't.
Is it Rick Prellinger from the Prellinger Library or Archives? I'm not sure. When the KUSF library was at risk, they already have a big archival project, so we can certainly get you his contact information.
Yeah, and I think he's connected with archive.org too.
Yeah, or his something was.
Yeah. Because archive.org also, and there's some stations. I think KBOO actually they have a grant and they're starting to do some work. So some of it, I mean, like right now, a lot of it is really just finding out what the needs are and who's out there.
Well,
So
I helped start a station down in Greenville, Mississippi, WDSV, and they're struggling. They're struggling along. But one of the people kind of connected the station, he one night he said, Ursula, I want to show you something. We were just like bored and didn't know what to do. It was a hot summer night. And he takes me to his father's backyard, and there's a tool shed back there. And he said, my father, Greenville used to be a hotbed of radio, like blues radio. And B.B. King had a radio show there, and there was this whole thing. And he said, my father used to be a DJ, and he opens up his tool shed, and the tool shed is like full of these, like lost blues records, like one-hit wonders that,
wow.
and they're just like stacked from floor to ceiling. There's thousands of them in there. And he said, this is my father's collection of Delta music. Most of it doesn't exist anymore. And I'm just like, whoa, holy crap,
Yeah.
and if WDSV had somebody helping them kind of lead them through that, they could do an incredible archival
Yeah.
show and archive at the same time, just playing this stuff and recording.
Exactly.
But they don't know how to do it.
Well, and some of what, you should email me about that, because it's possible maybe there's a scholar out there.
Who would
Is
work with them?
Yeah, and I think actually part of the project right now is they are connecting some academics and research assistants with some different collections. So that might be,
Yeah, I would
opportunity
love
right
to
there.
find somebody who would do
Yeah,
that.
that's cool.
And wasn't
crazy.
David Katz Nelson doing something specifically blues related?
oh, I don't know, maybe.
We should talk about it.
Okay, yeah.
Are you familiar with reclaimmedia.net? A service that transfers audio like that, Ursula? And I know our CEO had something to do with it, and I remember him saying something about working with Library of Congress and digitizing content that, like, every year when the copyright expired.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. There's lots of
Reclaimmedia.net.
there's lots of details. I don't know. This feels like a really cool puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
together.
this is a jackpot for somebody, and WDSV should benefit from that. But
Yeah.
it's like I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I think finding the right people to be sort of caretakers and to do grant
just
writing even.
the pictures on the front of those albums alone just were incredible and beautiful, beautiful albums. People that did one album and then disappeared.
That's amazing.
Gorgeous. I mean, just to photograph the albums would be amazing.
Does the task force have a list of best practices?
I don't think so, not at this point. But that's a good idea.
If anyone else has a question, I'll hold mine.
Actually, the best archival medium for recording sound by far vinyl.
Well, yeah, and I got to visit the Library of Congress, their big vault, and they're saving tape, and it's a good thing they saved some of the original versions, because when people first started digitizing things, that format is not that great. So, at least they can go back to the originals.
Yeah, well, tape deteriorates. Vinyl's going to stay around.
Too bad it's so darn bulky.
I believe that the Community Radio Fund of Canada offers grants for this kind of archiving.
There's a lot of cool stuff going on in Canada. I've seen some amazing grants for artists in residence at radio stations too. That would be awesome. There's some great projects in college radio in Canada related to radio art, radio history, probably everything you can imagine.
Do you remember the name of the station in Canada that you mentioned?
I think it's University of Calgary that made the book for their history. I think it's University of British Columbia that did a big digitization project. And I forget who had the artist in residence. But yeah, and like on my committee for the task force, we've been very inspired by some of these projects in Canada. So hopefully we can figure out how to use that to do some similar things here. Yeah.
You mentioned carrier current, AM, and one thing that all right, a lot of people here might not be into the technical side of things and not realize what was involved with carrier current AM. I mean, carrier current is basically what we now call what's part 15. This is limited range, unlicensed radio, which incidentally you can do a lot better on AM than you can on FM. Some colleges, including where I was, had some really elaborate systems to do this carrier current AM on the whole campus.
Yeah.
Or even more so on two campuses, where you have multiple buildings, you have high-rise dorms and things like that. And I remember a couple of the dorms, we had carrier current transmitters that were like, and you think of this unlicensed as being little stuff you can put in your pocket, but what I'm talking about is that this thing actually put out a few hundred watts.
Wow.
To feed the carrier current system.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. At Haverford, they had carrier current, and at one point they were broadcasting into places at Bryn Mawr too, which is like a mile away, in multiple dorms. And some colleges had multiple carrier current radio stations, competing stations. And yeah, I mean, they were as active as any college radio station today. And I know at Haverford there were times when they had over 150 participants on a campus of less than 1,000 students, and over 150 people were involved with the carrier current station. And that's how people got their news. It was like Twitter, that's how people found out about the Challenger explosion, about JFK's assassination. Like on a lot of campuses, they found out over carrier current radio and even over public address system radio. So I downplay it, because my show was only heard in the cafeteria, but it also meant you had an audience who couldn't go anywhere. They were all eating and they heard your show.
I'm curious, a completely different subject, but I've always been curious where the name Radio Survivor came from.
Matthew Lazar named it, so you'd have to ask him. I think it might be sort of like the whole idea of, the cockroach, it survives everything. Some people think it's a negative. I don't take it as a negative. I think of radio as persisting. And
how many people are involved with Radio Survivor?
There are 3 of us that founded it, and then it's 4 active people now. So Eric Klein is working on our podcast mainly. So Paul Rees-Mendel, Matthew Lazar, and myself were the founders, and then Eric joined to the podcast. And the podcast has been great because it's nice to have another way of transmitting this information, so we're not just writing about it, and I can bring back audio from tours and include that on the podcast. I thought I would get more audio here, but it's all been overwhelming. Well, should I let everyone take a little break before we can have a longer break? Are we good? Thanks so much. Thanks for coming.